a refusal to engage in a debate. It's impossible to engage in a debate with them on the basis of facts. And you will all have encountered people in the pub who have responded in this way, but as I was saying, most obviously in the broadly right-wing popular press. It's significant, even though it's not dominant, because it's immune to scientific argument, and its prevalence underlines the task of people that want to communicate on this issue and design new communication campaigns, that it's not enough to persuade by rational argument, but that what we actually need to do is develop a new form of common sense. The other twin repertoire in this vein is the British comic nihilism repertoire. It's another evasive, rhetorical repertoire, and it also rejects climate change. But this time as with a sort of whimsical, unserious, sort of blithely irresponsible tone. It's a sunny refusal to engage in the debate, and it's typified by comic musings on the possibilities that we in the UK in particular may gain with a future under climate change. You've seen it, you know, wonderful news, climate change is going to bring vineyards in the south of England and we're all going to have a wonderful life. It is marginal, but it's seen in a few places in the middle class press and radio, and it's potentially important because it's a very British repertoire. Self-mocking, contrary, it deals with adversity and threat by the use of humour. And it's a very middle-class one, which is important potentially for those agencies that are choosing to address a primarily middle-class professional audience, which a lot of government agencies, of course, are interested in doing, and others too. But it's marginal. The dominant repertoire that I haven't talked about yet is the small actions repertoire. It's a specific type of repertoire that sits under the group that can broadly be categorised as being optimistic but pragmatic. Everything will be fine as long as we do something. Small actions is the preeminent type of that sort of discourse.
No energy light bulbs.
Exactly. And it's prevalent everywhere. I mean, in the newspapers, in popular magazines, in communication campaigns from NGOs, more perhaps in the past than right now. But basically, it involves asking a large number of people to do a lot of very small things. You've seen all this as well. Turn down your thermostat, turn your lights off, replace your bulbs with more efficient bulbs, etc. The language is one of ease, convenience, it's effortless, but also it's domestic, which you can see with references to kettles and light switches and the rest. The problem, of course, is that it lapses into the wallpaper, the domestic, the routine, it's boring. It's too easily ignorable, and it lacks in energy, and it may not feel very compelling, particularly when it's placed, and as it often is, right alongside alarmism. You will have seen this too, in press headlines or in popular magazine features. 20 small things you can do to save the planet from destruction. There we go, have it in a nutshell. The fundamental problem is a one of scale here. The very contrast can be used by people who are opposing action to deflate, mock, reject alarmism particularly, and everything to do with climate change. But it's vital to understand if we're interested in changing behaviours on this issue. At the end of the day, the authors of the research that we commissioned concluded we have to address this fundamental mismatch in scale between bombarding people with messages that give them the impression this problem is so huge and on such a scale that they can't do anything about it, and then telling them that the way to solve the problem is to do these very small actions. It simply doesn't add up. They feel disempowered and people will switch off. And yet this is often what we see. This is, you know, whether by design or not, and often it's not by design, the net effect of all the media coverage alone on this issue is likely to feel the public feeling they can't make a difference. And as I said a few moments ago, if you look at the polls, it's exactly on the whole what people feel. Even though the issue of climate change has shot up the political agenda, the awareness of the issue has shot up amongst the public, concern has shot up, there's still a problem in terms of motivating people to take action. So what do we do? Well, there's a very basic thing, I suppose. to be done in terms of addressing the imbalance here. Journalists hate this, and The Independent, I don't know if you saw this when we published our research last summer. The report's called Warm Words. You can download it for free from our website, www.ippr.org. Devoted an entire editorial to attacking the report in The Independent. And they hate it, of course, because one of the conclusions is you do need to start spending a bit more time talking about the solutions, which journalists don't like doing because it's not very sexy. And when you talk about the solutions, talk about the big ones that can actually make people feel they can make a difference. Not the thermostats, the kettles, and the light switches, but some of the big things that people can do either in their own homes or collectively in terms of shifting away from car use to public transport, whether it's in the home, insulation, microgeneration, renewable energy generation, some of the big things. Of course, communications going back to the very beginning, even if you get it right, won't do the job. The government has to make a lot of changes in policy to make all of those things more affordable and convenient, etc. But if you're going to communicate, you need to get the scale issue right, and it hasn't been got right so far. A particular recommendation of the authors of our research on the discourse of climate change in the UK around these repertoires was that the problem, the disparity of scale between the enormity of climate change and small individual actions can be dealt with by harnessing the disparity through the use of myth. Myth traditionally can reconcile seemingly irreconcilable cultural truths, and they suggest can be used to inject the discourse with the energy that it currently lacks. And so they talked about finding ways of opposing the enormous forces of climate change with something that's almost superhuman or heroic. And the cultural norms they suggest that we normally expect to be true are that heroes are the ones who do, they're powerful, carry out great deeds, they're extraordinary, while ordinary people either do nothing or do bad things. And the mythical position is the one that occupies the seemingly impossible space between these issues, and that's an ordinary hero. So they think there's a very British resonance here. It's rooted in British culture, the idea of the ordinary hero. You can see it in the Dunkirk spirit and other aspects of more modern culture, and they even point to Live Aid. The issues are different and much more complex. But it's interesting, I think, this issue. We know that corporates spend a lot of time analysing language and imagery around it, and use and myth where they can to attract customers, and it's something that we might benefit from looking at too. But of course the challenge for communications is much broader, and the biggest challenge they conclude, and we agree with, is the need to make climate-friendly behaviours feel normal, natural, right, and ours to large numbers of people who are currently unengaged with the issue, and on whose emotional radar the issue doesn't even feature at all. And the answer, they say, isn't to try to change their radar, but to change the issue, so that it becomes something they willingly pick up, because it means something valuable in their own terms, that can be achieved by shaping communications in specific ways, including targeting at groups that are bound by shared values and behaviours rather than by demographics. And again, Chris has already touched on this a bit, and Solly made too. So make climate-friendly behaviours desired, simply by making them look like the kind of things that people like us do to large numbers of people. Reflecting the importance of the fact that a large portion of the population have esteem-driven needs. They want to feel special and accustomed to achieving the feeling special through what they do and what they buy, rather than what they don't do and what they don't buy, which is often the sorts of messages you get from green groups. Don't do this, don't buy that. And also make sure that communications are based on the basis that people increasingly trust other people more than they trust governments or business or other large institutions. Use image, metaphor, not rationalistic approaches to enable people to engage emotionally. And they say ultimately positive climate behaviours need to be approached in the same way as marketeers approach the acts of buying and consuming. And that means looking at the power of brands. I've touched the tip of the iceberg. There's a huge amount that hasn't been said, and Solly will hopefully pick up on some of these themes. But I hope that gives you a flavour of some of the research that we've engaged in, and has given you some food for thought if you're involved and are working on this issue, in terms of what is likely to work better than we currently have on the issue, and what is really to avoid at all costs if you're really interested in stimulating climate-friendly behaviour. Thanks very much.